Our scripture for today takes place a day or two after Jesus' triumphant entry into the city of Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. That's how far we've kind of gone into Matthew. He's addressing the disciples and the others who have gathered around, and he tells them that they're to listen to what the scribes and the Pharisees say to them, that there is nothing wrong with their teaching. Matter of fact, their teaching is correct. They are listening to them, but they are not to do as they do. The problem is they're not acting according to their own teaching. They're abusing their power. They went beyond their given authority, and they are burdening the people in such a way that it's oppressive and cumbersome, unreasonable, and in actuality, my guess is really unattainable. They have applied the Mosaic purity laws that were designed primarily for the priest in the temple to the people as a whole, and they themselves were unwilling to help the people. They exalted themselves by placing themselves in the spotlight in places of importance. At banquets, they loved to sit at the head of the table. In synagogues, they sat in the best seats, the one reserved for those people of honor. When they were out in public, they loved to have people greet them as rabbi. They allowed their power and their honor to go to their heads. The scribes and the Pharisees did not understand, for all who would exalt themselves will be humble, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. The definition of humility, as I looked it up, is the quality of being modest, of even politely submissive, and never being arrogant or contemptuous or rude. The opposite of humility is pride. The term humility comes from the Latin word humilitas, a noun related to the adjective humilius, which may be translated as humble. It also has the kind of translation from the earth. And so we hear people who have humility and meekness. They are down-to-earth people. There's a lot in Scripture about humility. Here's a sampling in Proverbs 22:4. We read, "The reward for humility and fear of the Lord is riches and honor and life." And in Colossians, "As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourself with compassion and kindness, humility, meekness, and patience." 1 Peter, "In the same way, you who are younger must accept the authority of the elders, and all of you must clothe yourself with humility in your dealings with one another. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble." Thanks to Deborah Tinsley Taylor, here are some quotes about humility. "What kills a skunk is the publicity it gives itself." I bet you can't guess who wrote that one. Abraham Lincoln. "The graveyards are full of indispensable men." Charles de Gaulle. "It's discouraging to make a mistake, but it's humbling when you find out you're so unimportant that no one noticed it." Chuck Daly. "A modest man who is usually admired if a person ever heard of him." That's Edgar Howe. Oh, this is one of my favorites. "Humility is like underwear, essential but indecent if it shows." "When you're as great as I am, it's hard to be humble," and I know you know who wrote this. Muhammad Ali. How about this one? "You know what keeps me humble? Mirrors." And for all of you older folks, I doubt the younger ones will know who this is. That was Phyllis Diller. And last and not least, our favorite newscaster, Ted Turner. "If only I had a little humility, then I would be perfect." Humility is a tricky concept. For example, we all know about the person who was awarded the most humble pin but lost it for wearing it. The moment we begin to think about having the quality of humility is the moment we endanger ourselves of losing it. Humility is not to be confused with being timid or being run over or weak. The simplest way to understand the concept of humility is to think less of ourselves and more of others. To be humble means that what we do not actively seek the place of honor. If by chance it does come to us, we simply and quietly accept it and give thanks for that. Humility attacks the attitude that fosters the overstuffed ego, the bigger than britches type of ego. One of the songs that I have on my playlist by Sarah Morales is, it's the song, and she says, "Who died and made you king of anything?" Humility keeps us grounded, focused, not allowing us to think better of ourselves than we should, keeping us from thinking that we are entitled to have that. We deserve special treatment. Rick Warren, in his popular book, The Purpose-Driven Life, writes, "Servants focus on others, not themselves. This is true humility, not thinking less of ourselves, but thinking more of ourselves less. They are self-forgotten. This is what it means to lose your life, forgetting yourself in service to others. When we stop focusing on our own needs, become more aware of the needs of those around us. When was the last time you emptied yourself for someone else's benefit? You can't be a servant if you're full of yourself." Jesus has headed to Jerusalem, and these are his last days. He's reminding and instructing the disciples on kingdom living, how they are to behave. To be a Christian is to take on a serving attitude, humbling oneself before God and others. It's not about grabbing the best seat at the table or attaining the most prominent spot so that you can show off and be seen. It's not about strutting around like some puffed up rooster. Being a Christian, a follower of Jesus Christ, is to take on Christ-like behavior. In Philippi, this is what Paul wrote: "Though he was in the form of God, Jesus did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave. Being born in human likeness and being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God also highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name." Humility does not have anything to do with one's actual position in the world, but has everything to do with how we view ourselves in connection to God and others. It generates a feeling of gratitude and not superiority. People who are humble do not seek out the limelight or accolades. They are not interested in being noticed. Matter of fact, a lot of the most humble people are the ones that are behind the scenes. They're the ones that cater to others and not to themselves. They are the ones that you will see at the end of the line, the ones that will receive the least, that go unnoticed. Leonard Bernstein once asked which instrument was the most difficult to play, and he thought for a moment, and then he replied, "The second fiddle. I get plenty of first violinists, but to find someone who can play the second fiddle with enthusiasm and a willingness, now that's a problem. And if we have no second fiddle, we have no harmony." It is a harmony that allows us to hear and see the depth and the breadth, the beauty, the worth, the blessing of God and of others. I contend that it is the second fiddle that makes the first so good. In the New York Times, back in 2018, a religion writer, Jonathan Merritt, reports that the language about Christian virtues is declining. Since the early 20th century, humility words like modesty have fallen off by 52%. Compassionate words like kindness have dropped by 56%. Now, this is back in 2018, so we can add 2 more years onto this. And gratitude words like thankfulness have declined by 49%. There is a whole lot to unpack and think about here, but I want to just highlight one thing for you. I want to challenge you to do something about it. We don't have to accept that it's a given that we no longer hold up these virtues, that we no longer lift up words like modesty and humble. We no longer have to think it's okay to take something without saying thank you. And thank you for teaching Parker that. We don't have to accept that we don't do that anymore. We can do our part to change the trajectory of such a trend. Go out and do something nice for someone else, just because. Give them a compliment. Spend some time with them. Write a note to someone that you haven't seen in a long time. Say thank you. Okay, this is what I'm going to challenge you to do. Say thank you at least 3 times today before you go to bed tonight, and not to the same person. Set your goals on spreading joy. And I love that that's what we name our children's program, Joy. Jesus first, others second, and yourself last. Think of ways that you can make this a better day for your spouse. Yes, you can go golfing. Your children, yes, I will fix you dinner. Your neighbor, I will pick up all the leaves from my tree that goes into your yard. Your boss, put a smile on someone else's face. Humility, kindness, thankfulness, gratitude. It describes the way of Christ and the way that we as followers are to clothe ourselves. We are to be different. Not to stand out in the world, but to bring joy and peace and hope and grace to the world. It's about living a life, a blessing, rather than seeking a life, a blessing. It's about kingdom living. And so let me close with a nice little catchy quote from my dear friend, the Peanuts gang. It was in the comic. If you like to read Peanuts, I'd like Peanuts. And it was this big thing, and it had Snoopy and Charlie Brown and Lucy. And then it says, on the little caption down below, it says, attitude is contagious. Is yours worth catching? Attitude is contagious. Is yours worth catching?